Again, my name is Esther Herr. I'm with CCIJ. I just want to welcome everybody for joining us today on this session, Investigative Journalism and Web3, the Ask Me Anything session, for us at CCIJ. I'm here with Scott Lewis, our Creative Director and Business Development Lead, as well as Serena Stellatana, who is our Metaverse Designer, and of course, our Founder and Executive Director, Jeff Kelly Lowenstein. So real quick word about CCIJ for those who are unfamiliar with our organization. We seek to impact discourse and policy, increase accountability, and identify solutions to the planet's most critical problems through top quality collaborative journalism. And so we do this by bringing investigative, visual, and data journalists from around the world together to produce this world-class journalism while developing skills and carrying out investigations into issues impacting vulnerable communities. We are going to be focusing on today's session related to, as I mentioned, investigative journalism and Web3. And the way we're going to approach this session is first having Scott and Serena say a little bit about this work and what we've learned. And from there, we will begin to answer the questions that you all have asked through the registration as well as in the chat. So even though you haven't asked a question, maybe in the registration, go ahead and use the chat box to ask the question, preferably forwarding that question to me, Esther Herr. And we will go in order of receiving those questions as we ask. We'll be here for 60 minutes. We will have time afterwards to explore the space, the actual space itself later on, but I don't want to get too far ahead here. So with that, again, if you haven't already, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. I want to invite Scott to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. It's great to see some familiar and new names on our list here. I just want to start off first by, for those of you who don't know, we do a lot of work throughout Western and Southern Africa, and wanted to share some news that the publisher and journalist with WikiTimes, Haruna Mohammed Salisu, was arrested yesterday while covering the election in Nigeria, and we are concerned about his status. He's still in custody and they have not shared any information further. So we just wanted to share that information. We are calling for his release and hope that happens soon. So with that, about 2 years ago, we began our venture into the metaverse to find how and if journalism can get a foothold in that space. And we did that. John Lowenstein, who was our then innovation director and is a TED Fellow, Guggenheim Fellow, and photojournalist with the NOR agency, brought to us this idea of the metaverse as an emerging platform. I'd say almost none of us knew what he was talking about. But he was convinced that this was an opportunity for small organizations like ours to lead, to experiment, and find new ways to present journalism, to engage communities, to find new revenue models. And all of those things are things that every journalism organization in the world is seeking. And so we dipped our toe in and did a project, or published a project that we did in the Gambia on a platform then called CryptoVoxels, now called Voxels. We later brought on Serena, who took us to a whole other level to create an immersive experience on Voxels, where we published a project we did in northeastern Nigeria on desertification, which we partnered with some journalists from an outlet called Hum Angle, which is a new digital outlet in Nigeria. And we expanded the idea of what we could do in immersive spaces. And so we reinterpreted the work to create a world. And it had multiple levels, and we can share that link and you can explore it. Although if you're not familiar with Minecraft type experiences, it may be a little challenging at first, but as you can see here, it's a highly interactive space where the journalism comes to life in 3 dimensions, and you can explore, you can interact with others, and really kind of, it's a way to put journalism out in the world in a new way. We then took a step back to think about, why are we doing this, and how can we really elevate that experience to not just be cool and interesting, but to make journalism relevant for new audiences. And so we wanted to expand other platforms, because Voxels is cool and all, but it's got some limitations, of course. And we didn't want to get behind the 8 ball. I think, like most would argue, journalists did back in the 90s when the digital revolution began, and it was seen as a fad, as inconsequential, and that print would be forever. Well, we all know that's not true, but the question for me, it's coming from the creative side, but also coming from a business strategy standpoint, was how can we, with upholding our journalistic values, take charge and lead when it comes to new technology, so that we're not being dictated to, but that we're doing the driving. And so having a partner like Serena as a metaverse builder, partnering with us as journalists and creatives, we all work together to push the medium forward. We work to push the storytelling modalities forward. And we look at, it's not one solution that's going to fix everything, but it becomes a diversified strategy of new ways to present work, and new ways to get it out there. And we've got a new project that we're excited to share today for the first time, on a new platform for us. It's called Spatial, and it allows for a different way of building. And it's an evolution of the concept. Serena's showing here a really cool little feature of basically the back room, her sketches and the development process, which I think is something it seems maybe a little superficial at first, but it really speaks to the idea of transparency, right? Where we're showing how we got there, a little bit of the sausage making. So these platforms allow for a lot of creative ways of doing things that you're not limited by the structure of a web page or the limitations of a print surface. And with that, maybe I'll turn it over to Serena, who can introduce us to the spatial space and how we built that to serve this project that we did in South Africa.
Hello, thank you so much, Scott, for the introduction. Yes, as you just said, we approached this new challenge with a new platform, as we did with Voxel, using all the tools we could, and that could serve the story based in South Africa. Yes, I can talk about a bit how I first became a builder in this Ethereum-based virtual world, which is Voxels, that you are seeing here now on the screen. Basically, I was we were called at the time a crypto artist. In 2017, I was a digital artist, and among the first that used the blockchain to certify their pieces of art. And so towards Crypto Voxels, I was introduced by a fellow artist who also was a builder in there and a Minecraft expert. And I started building just to exhibit and explore some of my artistic projects. And then I met 2 years ago the CCIJ, and we started designing and thinking about these new tools, both in metaverse world, but also into NFTs. So basically how assets, digital assets could be valued and their value be assessed and determined on a shared register, global register, which is the blockchain. And yes, soon in the video, we will come to the third upper floor, where we have the portal to this new world. One of the research I wanted to introduce to this work about reportage and investigative journalism was a multi-platform approach. Also because I can see, and we can all see how the space is evolving with so many different gamifying aspects of the metaverse. And I was eager to explore those, and with the CCIJ and these compelling stories, I have found a beautiful environment to do that.
Okay, why don't we go ahead then and get started. Thank you, Serena. Thank you, Scott. We'll go ahead and get started with the first question that we received, the question in the registration. What was your very first thought when you first heard about Web3? Let me invite either of you to go ahead and start that question.
Sure. Like I said before, didn't really know what it was. And the more I've dug into it, the more it went from this gamified Minecraft kind of thing, and the explosion of NFTs and Bored Ape and all that kind of stuff, where I've really come to appreciate it. I think coming from this, what first seemed a little maybe silly, but Web3 all of a sudden changes the dynamics, and it becomes a platform where you own the relationship with your audiences. We don't rely on, Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or anyone else to control that relationship, that you're able to own that relationship and manage it and engage with it directly. And that affords a lot of opportunities to deepen your audiences and not cater to them, but really understand them and understand how to produce work that keeps them coming back and supporting the work you do. And I think that that's a vital thing that has been compromised over the last several years in journalism that we can rebuild. So for me, understanding what Web3 can bring to the table for journalism organizations and individual journalists is exciting and profound. And for us right now, it's about experimenting and asking questions and not worrying about having solutions just yet, but it's about understanding the language and the possibilities of where we can go. And that's where I'm at with the Web3 platforms.
Serena, is there anything else you'd like to add, or should we move on?
I think I said already in my introduction to Web3 in 2017. Yes, for me, the promise, of course, at the beginning was to have access also to revenue, a different new revenue. And so, yes, now I'm observing how things are developing in these NFTs and the Web3 world. And yes, I will keep experimenting because I really believe in the tech.
Okay. Thank you for that, Serena. The next question that was asked was, what are some of the ethical questions that come up when using open platforms? What's the crucial use of open platforms that are ideal on ethical grounds?
I think that every technological advance brings new questions about ethics. I mean, it happened when Photoshop was introduced. It happened when digital cameras came on board. There are going to be bad actors, and there's going to be ethical compromises that happen along the way, regardless of the technology. I think we have to be really attentive and learn the technology to understand what can be done and how to put in alerts, sensitivities, so that training continues to evolve, that we don't just presume everybody understands how to use the technology, so that it stays aligned with journalistic values. But to me, creating worlds in these spaces is an evolution of what's created on a newspaper page or on a website page. You choose fonts, you choose colors, you choose placements. Those are all ethical decisions of building a world, building a universe in which the journalism sits and functions. And this is just another version of that. Just because it holds a lot of potential to do other things doesn't mean that it inherently is unethical. But you definitely need to continue to be diligent about your ethics and stay on top of that, so you don't get ahead of yourselves and find yourself in the situation that you should have been a little more conservative about.
Serena, do you have a follow-up to that comment as well?
Yes, we are experimenting with both an open platform like Spatial, which is based on a monthly fee, but you can actually also build a lot without having any subscription. But also we are experimenting at first with the boxes in which we the CCIJ bought the land. So this is the first digital asset that the CCIJ has had in their wallet. And there are, of course, differences in, especially in how the platforms decide and can develop. If they start as boxers having to rely on the selling of the land to proceed the research, and so you can still see this kind of development in bigger steps when they have the possibility, economical possibility to pay their developers. And instead, Spatial has the more usual economic model, so that they can also plan in time for new releases and all of that. So yes, the difference is working with both is to know how this economic works inside these open platforms for me.
Thank you, Serena.
Esther, I want to jump in real quick. I figured, like, we've been watching this video, and I think maybe it's a good moment to kind of explain a little bit about what we're seeing. Sure. Serena, do you want to walk everyone through a little bit about what we're watching here, and so that I think people got a sense of the world, but then maybe walk through what it is.
Yes, so here we are seeing the latest version of our reverse of sewage investigation rooms in the metaverse. We were just saying with Scott that after the intervention of one of our editors, Yafa Frederick, which is incredible. She did a very good job in basically she took everything, every asset and space we had designed in these past 6 months, and found a story we could tell with the captions. And so, yes, here you can see a reconstruction of the Kailisha neighborhood, which is an informal settlement in Cape Town, South Africa. This investigation was led by Open Up and the CCIJ with a big influence of the data, thanks to both the organizations, data scientists, that worked a lot to gather, and also to offer another view about what was happening with the child death rates in these neighborhoods. So we decided to start introducing the space around the house, and then to show how it was, how difficult it is to escape this wastewater and sewage running through the streets. We decided to make people walk both the streets and a small one-room house, as the one described in the reportage.
Serena, can you share that droplet and the video of it and what that is all about? I think it's a really interesting advancement of using the technology to bring a different view, at least from a print journalism perspective.
Yes, about that, we actually, that was one of the first things that we wanted to explore in this story, because parallel, but also very important, very crucial part of this 3D world is that you can, of course, show data in a way that is different and perhaps more interesting. And so, yes, we designed with my partner, Emanuele Lecchi, which is a very known expert in simulation, fluid dynamics simulations. We designed these droplets, which represent the rates of death, of children death in the variant of time between November and the next year, when the surge season is up in Cape Town. And so in the droplets, you can see the augment of the water and also the turbidity of the water that represent the increase of rates of children deaths in that particular time. So this was our first way to play with the data and try to explore and to imagine different ways of rendering them into this space.
And when we see the recording here, I'll make sure to pause it so we can see that droplet idea, but you can certainly explore that on your own when we give you the link to access this space. I want to move on though to the questions again. The next question is, how can you utilize the uniqueness of Web3 maximally? It's a big question. How can you utilize the uniqueness of Web3 maximally?
Serena, I will leave that one to you.
That's a nice one. So Web3 is a word that can contain, of course, some different tools. And we can observe, of course, Web3 itself as a tool that can be used to, in our situation, we can imagine to use it both to explore the virtual aspect of it. So participate in this idea of the metaverse that is basically a reality that that many users, many people are agreeing on that it exists, and they experience it. So this is the way the metaverse actually manifests itself. So Web3, it's very can appear very complex, but it actually is, as it defined, as a layer over everything we already know is possible to do inside the web, the normal web, the internet we know already. In this particular case of the CCIJ investigations in Web3, what I see as more viable. We can something we can use of Web3 is, of course, the metaverse, and also this digitalization of everything we can think about, even these spaces themselves that can be minted, which means can be connected and assigned to a contract on the blockchain and sold to everybody who might want to host virtual event or real life events where they want to propose an experience like this. Of course, the pictures can be tokenized and have them in a variety of different platforms, but especially on OpenSea, if we talk about the Ethereum blockchain, which is a very big, we can think about it as a very big publication house that where you can find anything from profile pictures that we saw sold for 1,000. And of course, very interesting projects like the first books on the blockchain ever published, and also the digital books that now are starting to be a feature in many online libraries. So yes, for me, Web3 represents this for the CCIJ, both the virtual part, but also this virtual world as a place to show everything we can and may want to get revenue from.
Thank you, Serena. I want to move on to the next question. How can a small newsroom create Web3 for investigative journalism projects? How can a small newsroom create Web3 for investigative journalism projects? Thoughts on that question?
It's like time, time and the willingness to learn a new technology. I mean, this project is, I believe, Serena, correct me if I'm wrong, your first one in spatial. So this was a learning by doing, and it requires just a willingness to experiment and devote the time to do something. That's something that I think distinguishes CCIJ, is by having someone like Serena on our team who is devoted to this. I don't think that has to happen, but like a lot of investments in your organization, you have to devote the resources to it and prioritize it. And it may mean you can't do other things, but if you care about trying something new, it becomes about setting priorities and keeping it small scale. Don't get me wrong. As you explore this project, hopefully on your own, you'll see it's really big. It's really layered, lots of stuff going on here. And there's even a gamification of data that we'll get to later in this. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be this vast. It can be really simple and straightforward that allows you to dip your toe in the water. Everything doesn't have to be a home run. It could just be simply trying it on and seeing how it works, seeing what you might be able to do the next time you try it. The most important part to me is a willingness to experiment. And that is not dictated by size or budgets, because this is a free platform right now to be able to go in and build in. So it's just a matter of how willing you are to spend the time doing it. And think about how the tool can be used for you. In some ways, I think small newsrooms can be better suited because you don't have a lot of burdens of legacy and layers of bureaucracy and fiefdoms and all that stuff. So I think small newsrooms can be well equipped to lead here.
Okay. Somewhat of a related question that somebody asked is, what's one tip or most important would you give a freelance investigative journalist on creating their own virtual space? What's one tip or the most important thing you would give a freelance investigative journalist, on creating own virtual space?
Oh, go ahead, Serena.
Well, I think to connect to what Scott was saying is do a bit of research. Keep in mind that especially now the market is very much booming, so there are a lot of different platforms with different levels of difficulty to build in. And so, yes, just explore, keep in mind that you have to dedicate, especially at the beginning, a lot of hours of understanding. But the tools themselves are getting more approachable as we talk. So it should be, after a bit of understanding, initial understanding, it should be pretty easy, in my opinion.
Okay.
And I would add partnerships. I mean, it's a new technology, so there's going to be people out there who have started exploring building, but need a project to build around. So I think that, bringing your expertise together with someone else who has expertise and desire to do something can really create something profound. I mean, no one person could have done all this. This is a team effort of a lot of people contributing different stuff along the way to get here. And this is probably at least our fourth or fifth iteration of this story idea. So there's a lot of experimenting, a lot of building that you just moved on from. And that just requires a good team. And that's just about, finding kindred spirits.
Thank you. Next question. What opportunities and challenges will AI present in Web3? How will AI interact with Web3 in ways that journalists should understand?
Yeah, that's kind of the big scary question of the moment for a lot of us, I think.
It's an Ask Me Anything session.
Yeah, no, anything means anything. I don't know. AI is terrifying and maybe exciting in some ways, but I think it just ramps up the need, a greater need for ethics and a greater need for collaboration and dialogue amongst ourselves to ensure that we have some standards that we can anchor to. And there's new technologies that are emerging. Thankfully, Adobe got ahead of this about a year or so ago and started developing a new tool through their content authentication initiative, is what it's called, where photographs will have badges on them that will be able to track provenance from the moment of creation all the way through the moment of presentation. And unfortunately, I think we're going to have to start having tools like that let the audience know the provenance of the work. But it slows down the elegance of the process a little bit. But I think on the other hand, we need to have certainty around this. So we're all going to kind of stumble through this, and there are going to be some probably painful moments along the way.
Serena, your thoughts on this question?
I think that more of everything, I'm curious to see how AI will help with data in reporting as well. And so yes, that's the thing that I find more interesting in AI application. So how to allow very complex data to be more human understandable.
I was having a conversation with someone last fall who was concerned about all this. He's a veteran journalist, and he was saying as much as these things can provide a lot of horsepower, it's important to have non-technologists, people who bring humanistic values to these conversations at the table, and not getting lost in the technical conversations or the coding and all that, but making sure that we're maintaining these values front and center in the evolution of this stuff. Sometimes I think technology kind of run the show a little bit, and I think we have to slow that down.
Thank you to you both. Let me continue with we still have several questions here, so I want to continue to the next one. Are universities and other tertiary institutions around the world doing enough to train aspiring journalists in Web3 journalism? Are universities and other tertiary institutions around the world doing enough to train aspiring journalists in Web3 journalism?
It's new, so I don't know. I've gotten a lot of interest by professors for this, so I think that the interest is there. I think this technology, from a mainstream standpoint, is only a couple years old, so I think we're still there. I would like to think so. I'd like to think that this is something that people are talking about, and I've seen a lot of academics have been pushing VR and all sorts of stuff for a while, whether it's at Syracuse or University of Southern California. I think that there's conversations going on, which I think is important, probably more so than in actual newsrooms.
Serena, any thoughts on that one as well?
Yes, I agree. As far as I could see in these 2 years with the CCIJ, there's a lot of interest from university teachers and teachers in general that want to help their students be ready, perhaps, for the virtual and augmented reality we are building.
Thank you. Question from the chat. What is the average demographics of visitors to this space? Do we have that information, Serena?
Yeah.
Demographics.
Yes, I was researching about this because I was curious exactly about the demographic. I read an article about the metaverse in Web3. So this past 5 years of frequentation by many people inside these platforms. And there's, of course, many millennials like me. And but as you can expect, also many young people between 18 and 25 of age. So yes, the bigger tranche is millennials, from the baby millennials to the 45, 48 people. So yes, it's a pretty wide.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I would add to that is there was an NFT convention in New York a couple years ago, and I didn't go, but we have a colleague who did, and she said the vast majority of people there were Gen X. So this is not the exclusive provenance of college students and crypto punks by age, but which to me says there's serious application for this, even though the initial phase is looking like video games. There's a lot of serious potential here.
Thank you. The next question that somebody asked here is, sorry, I'm just trying to, okay. Do you anticipate the sort of interactivity being accessible to those without powerful computers and strong Ethernet or Wi-Fi access? Will this be practical for consumers viewing on phones using cell data?
It already is. The CryptoVoxel site is great on the phone, and these can be embedded directly into an existing website as an iframe. And I'll share a link here in a second on our Vesa page where we've done that. So it's already very accessible. You do not need a ton of computing power, and that's what makes this pretty exciting.
Yes, we also worked a lot from the first version to this one, especially in spatial, just to achieve that the most comfortable experience for many different devices.
Thank you. The next question is, what kind of interactive activity with the audience/events could happen in spatial now? And what could be possible in the future? Are there any success examples? What kind of interactive activities with the audience / events could happen in spatial now, and what could be possible in the future? Is there any success examples?
Yes, there is already a lot of events going on daily in spatial, especially now that they have just released their toolkit based on Unity. So Unity is a software which is built for creating games. So many gamers and people like me, which are interested in these interactive and immersive experiences, are using this toolkit, which is yes, designed especially for that, to imagine and build experiences with high interactivity, as you can imagine with a game, a proper video game. Yes.
There's also community building that you can do in these spaces. You can hold events like an art gallery opening, or a conference. You can hold meetings in spatial. I know there are software companies that are doing this pretty regularly, especially with people being remote. You can also build off of that into the real world. So there's a lot of potential there. There's a story from last fall on the nation of Tuvalu, who wants to preserve their culture in the metaverse. They see climate change coming. They're worried about losing the islands, and they want to use the metaverse as a way to retain their identity, not just as a culture, but there's also they're shipping controls of the water space around their island, and they want to maintain that. They don't want to lose that, and so they're looking to use the metaverse as a means to, keep their real life concerns alive, even as their land is threatened. So I think that there's a lot of very interesting and compelling use cases for this that are emerging.
Great. I like to invite people to continue to ask your questions in the chat. And if you prefer, feel free to take yourself off mute and ask your questions using your own voice to Scott and Serena. And as we wait for additional folks, Scott or Serena, is there anything else that you find so exciting about this new iteration? What did we learn from the previous iteration that we figured out with this new iteration that gets you really excited?
Shall I go?
Yeah,
please.
You did the building.
Well, but exactly this last iteration is the designers and the editor work. So yes, this is what I find really exciting about it, because it really now has that narrative part that we were looking for in the past 5 versions of this space. So this is what I really like.
Yeah, I think that for us, this has been about finding out. We didn't have goals other than learning, and we have. And one of the things is that there's a potential to do a lot, which is exciting, and it can suck you in. And at the same time, it can also be distracting in that, because you can do so much, you're drawn to want to do a lot. And I think restraint is hard, but I think it's important as we move forward to really think about, what we've learned about what the value of the technology is and the platforms, and to be even more precise, like any good editing, right? You can do a lot of reporting, but the value comes in with the choices you make about what you're going to do, not what you could do. And that is exciting. Those guardrails, those limits are fantastic for really sharpening the point of why you're using this technology. And to go one step further, I think that will elevate its business case, right? As journalists, we need to think about, if just because this is interesting and compelling and we can create cool experiences, we should keep in mind, what is the business case for this? Because eventually it's going to come down to resources and how you allocate money and people and technology. So really being cognizant of that is important. And I think that it puts us as creators in a uniquely strong position to build and make those arguments and create at the same time, as opposed to first needing a ton of investment into infrastructure to be able to do it. Right now, we don't need that. Right now, we can go on these open source platforms that are free, build really cool, exciting things, and drive the entire ethos and operation forward and set the terms on our values, not those of people who don't do journalism, even if they're in a journalism space. So that for me is what makes this really exciting.
I just want to, I'm sorry, I paused the video here, but I wanted to get back to one of the design elements that Serena described earlier and Scott mentioned, is this idea of this drip water interface. I'm going to just scroll it just a tad back here. When you get into this space, you'll go through this pipe and then you'll see these images. It's incredibly realistic, but really showing us and making us feel viscerally this idea of the sewage issues that South Africa in this particular case is facing. I know there's a question in the chat and I feel like somebody else took themselves off mute, and I do see a hand up with Ajibola. So let's start first with the person in the chat. Rasha asks, how do we dip our feet in this? How do we start exploring the possibilities as a small organization? Perhaps this is more of a nuts and bolts kind of question. You know, if anybody can provide that information, how do we get started is basically the question.
What I can say about anything related to Web3 is that it happens a lot in Discord. And many of these platforms are, as Scott was saying before, trying or fostering already big communities. So inside these communities, there's builders, there's artists, photographers, and also attorneys to help you with the legal side of the blockchain, which is pretty disconcerting sometimes, oftentimes. And yes, so what I usually do if I find a word that I would like to build on is find their Discord or a Telegram, usually it's on Discord, and go there. They have everything in lists, so you have to sign up as a builder, as someone who is exploring, and so there you can find a lot of info, a lot of people willing to help you. Also because starting from the crypto point of view, the crypto community, and after the crypto art community, a side of that community is very much the solidarity between builders. So yes, this is still there in many of these communities.
Thank you, Serena. I think there was somebody who went off mute and then went back on mute. If you wanted to ask your question by voice, could you ask that now, please? We'll give you a few seconds to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that for me?
I think it was somebody else, but go for it.
Oh, great. Thank you very much once again. Thank you very much, Scott and Serena, for your presentation and all that. So Scott, I heard you talk about the value of metaverse, and this brings me back to the conversation I was having with a couple of colleagues when I was telling them about what we're doing with metaverse in CCIJ, and they were like kind of cool about it. I said, how do we, do something like that and monetize it? What's the business value of bringing metaverse to our journalism and all that? And I struggle to answer that question because I don't have the answers to that question myself. So I know you touched on that, but I would like to speak more about it. The second leg of my question is going to dwell around the ethics of metaverse, ethics of everything else. So what is the ethics that should guide, our operations in this space? Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you. And just for everyone, Ajibola, where our thoughts are with you in Nigeria as the election rolls on. Ajibola is our Africa editor and is based in Nigeria. On the monetization, to be very honest, nobody has figured out how to consistently monetize Web3. There are early stage platforms popping up all over the place. I found one the other day in the fashion world where someone left Ralph Lauren to create their own Web3 platform, and they were doing an initial membership where you could buy into being an early adapter into their site for 0.2 ETH. There were almost 1,000 people who had signed up to be a part of this platform that offers nothing other than opportunity. They offers something in the future. That's $500,000 right there of just curiosity. So nobody knows yet, but eventually somebody will figure this out. Eventually there will be best practices for monetization. So I'd rather be a part of figuring that out than wait for someone else to figure it out and tell me, or have to learn the language once it gets there. So I think it's important to not overstate what it is and to recognize where it is in this cycle. That's why we've emphasized this is early. In a couple of years, this is probably going to look incredibly rudimentary, and that's okay. And then on the ethics, I think like anything else, you have to let your ethics guide your decision-making and know what feels. It's tough when you're experimenting and pushing the envelope and not breaking it. So I think that inevitably it's important to have dialogue, to continue these as conversations in your news organizations about what is the right choice to make for your organization and the work you're doing, and maybe to remember to be a little more conservative about how far you're going to push that, because in journalism, when you make those mistakes, it can be seriously consequential. And that's one reason we did not go into minting NFTs initially, because this isn't a piece of art that is not disconnected, that's not connected to the real world. It is. And these are real people living real lives, and we're doing serious work, and we didn't want to find ourselves out ahead of something and end up in a difficult situation, which some news organizations did rush into NFTs and had to back away almost immediately. So I think that, caution is an important part of that, not getting sucked into potential economic windfalls, which probably aren't going to happen anyway. So I don't know if that answers your questions. There's a lot of I don't knows right now, and that's just kind of part of where we're at.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the response, Scott. Thank you, Serena, also for answering some really excellent questions about this. We want to continue the conversation, and we will invite you to enter in the actual spatial space that you've been seeing on this video. But before I drop that link, I want to let you know that as we're coming to the conclusion of our session, when we stop the Zoom session, you will be directed straight to an evaluation. It is very short. It'll take you less than 1 minute to complete. So please take a moment to do that. We also want to highlight the fact that some of the questions that you shared were related to things outside of this particular topic, things related to access to specific data sets and such things. And so I want to highlight that we are going to be having many different professional learning sessions, one called Data Journalism for Dummies. That'll be in March. We'll do another one about open source intelligence or OSINT in May. That's thanks to Ajibola, who you just heard. And we'll also be talking about FOIA and accessing public records. That'll be in August. So if you are not on our email list, do so. Please let us know. We'll get you on there so you can receive that information. Previous professional learning sessions tackling some of the additional questions can be found on our YouTube channel. You just see that dropped in the chat there. And check that out. So with that said, I want to go ahead and drop the spatial link. And then as I do that, I want to invite Scott and Serena if you want to say any last words before we end this session.
No, just thanks for coming. We appreciate it. We're, bumping around in the digital dark and finding our way with this, and wanted to share some initial impressions and work that our team has done, and just appreciate the folks showing up and asking some great questions.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for coming, for your questions. And I will be available both on spatial and also through my email at the CCIJ. If any of you wants to ask more about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you, Scott. And again, just to reiterate that they will stay, they will be in spatial in just a moment. So meet them there. They can continue to answer your questions. So on behalf of CCIJ, I just want to thank everybody for your participation. Take a look at the chat. There is the link. I'm going to stay on just for another 30 seconds, but that doesn't mean you have to stay on. Go ahead and log off, and we'll see you in spatial in a few. Thank you, everybody.